Welcome to the Disco Very Arlington Discovery webinar. We're very excited to welcome you here today. This is the sequel to our inaugural webinar last October, the Arlington Big Wave Copper Porphyry webinar. We had so much fun, we thought we'd do it again with more dress up and more importantly, more disco music. Before we get started, a couple of bits of housekeeping. We, Arlington, will not be providing any investment advice today, and all the information that you receive from the presenting companies, thank you presenters, is all in the public domain. The 1970s were a very creative period. Apple Computer was born, most of us own an Apple device, man walked on the moon, and it was also the scene of a very famous exploration discovery adventure known as the Poseidon Nickel Adventure. On the first slide, you can see the Poseidon share price. As the decade of the 1960s came to a close, 1969, the nickel price vaulted from £2,000 per ton of nickel to £7,000 per ton of nickel due to the Vietnam War. And Poseidon made a nickel discovery. They announced on October the 1st, 1969, 40 meters at 1.56% from their Lake Windara nickel discovery. The Poseidon share price promptly went from 80 cents a share to $12 a share, some 15 times after that discovery was announced in October of 69. So the initial discovery event was a 15-time return for shareholders. However, that was just the beginning. As the decade closed, one UK stockbroker announced that the Poseidon shares could in fact be worth as much as $382 a share. The shares, in fact, went to $280 a share, up from 80 cents pre-discovery. That was a gain of some 350 times. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the reason that we're all here today, because the gains available to shareholders, to investors in exploration companies, are potentially life-changing. Bringing that forward to today, we're going to look at two companies initially. In fact, our keynote speaker is a famous and one of the world's most successful explorers, and we thank Tim Goyder and his MD Alex Dorsch today from Chalice Mining and Tim's stable of exploration companies. On the second slide here, you can watch the Chalice share price versus another of today's presenting companies, Laphroaig Expiration. Now, the interesting thing about this and the point about the comparison with Poseidon is that you can see that post-discovery, around 100 days after Chalice made their initial discovery at their Julimar palladium nickel project 80 kilometers from Perth last March, as we were all scurrying for our first lockdown, you could in fact have bought the Chalice shares at around $1. They've gone up 5 times, but you could have bought them around $1 a share, as the geologists at Chalice and Tim's team were getting ready to go and drill out this potentially globally significant discovery. Now on that chart, you can see there's an orange line. The blue line is Chalice and the orange line is Laphroaig Expiration. We think that today Laphroaig might be where Chalice was a year ago after they made the discovery. And in fact, Laphroaig is about 90 or 100 days since they announced their discovery hole in February this year. And we'll be asking the CEO of Laphroaig, Wade Johnson, where is he at on his discovery? Thank you to Merlin Johnson, who's written the Arlington Discovery White Paper. Merlin looks at exploration companies and when they add drill rigs. Now, that's a very obvious clue that anybody can interpret that gives you a clue as to where these companies are on their exploration discovery curve. So that's Chalice and Laphroaig versus Poseidon. Moving on to the next slide, one thing we can say that was consistent with Poseidon in the 1960s and the beginning of the disco era, 1970s, and today for Chalice, Laphroaig, and all of the companies presenting today is that commodity prices are really important for deciding what the share prices and the magnification, the amplification of those share prices do when they make a discovery. And that's because the equity capital that's given to explorers to make discoveries, the risk capital that's given to these entrepreneurs, only occurs in bull markets. So the bull markets occur when the commodity prices are going up, and so when the commodity prices and the bull markets end, so does the exploration cycle. So this chart, courtesy of the World Bank, looks at commodity prices since 1960s. Base metals are in red, oil's in black, and you can see that actually we still haven't yet got back to, not even halfway back in the case of oil, to the super cycle that was the industrialization of China 2000 through 2010. So the good news for investors in exploration companies is that we're probably not halfway done yet. My final slide here is a clue that actually this cycle might even be better than the last. And the reason for that is we haven't had an exploration cycle for a long time. If you look at the blue bars on this copper discovery chart, which comes from S&P Global Market Intelligence 1990 to 2020, you'll see that we were making copper discoveries through the 90s at a rate of about 50 tons of copper a year, and companies globally were spending around $800 million to $1 billion a year on finding those 50 million tons of copper a year. In fact, what's happened since then in the 2010 period to today, copper exploration budgets have tripled to over $2.5 billion a year, but the rate of discovery has fallen from some 50 tons of copper a year to less than 8. The reason for that is we haven't had an exploration cycle for approximately 20 years, and the companies that make the discoveries and the investors want to back are the smaller ones. And these are the creative, the risk takers, the Tim Goyders, who could be called the John Travolta of exploration. These are the risk takers and the experts at making discoveries, not the big companies. The big companies are about mitigating and reducing risk for operating environments. Junior companies are about taking calculated risks. So what we're hoping to do here today, a bit like our Porphyry webinar, we've got 6 of who we think are the world's best exploration companies. We've also got 2 world-leading geologists. And with that, I'd like to hand over to my chairman, Mr. Richard Laphroaig.